Welcome. And Janie, I will pass it to you to kick us off before we get into our learning.
Wow, well, thank you. So it's so good to see everybody. I know this is our second in the series, and if you did not attend last session, that is okay, but this session is all about how we can Google like a pro, and our next session, our third in the series, is going to be about AI. I do hope that you all have started to dig into some of these great resources and use them in your classrooms and to really help you with thinking about how you want to design learning and what that looks like in your classroom and why it's really important to have media and digital literacy skills and how this can help with this. And so this is going to be a great learning session as you really think about what is Google. We say all the time, just Google it, and we don't even know what that means anymore. And so this is going to be a great session. Just to recap, all educators who are in attendance will receive a professional learning hour for attendance. You will receive everything at the end of all three. So if you do attend all three sessions, you'll just earn one certificate for attendance. And so this is a certificate that you will receive for PL hours. You will have to talk to your own district on whether or not it does count for anything as far as movement on your salary schedule. So if you have questions, please put it into the chat. I'm happy to answer them. And with that, I'm going to kick it back off. Erin, let's start Googling like a pro.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. All right, well, just going to give you a few reminders about us. I'm Erin Olson from the News Literacy Project. My colleagues Terry and Brittany will be in the wings sharing in the chat and answering questions. And if you haven't done so, go ahead and share your name, what you teach, where you're from. Perhaps you can find some like-minded Rolla-like colleagues in the chat to connect with. And then I want you to think about when it comes to news literacy, what do you believe? The News Literacy Project is a nonpartisan education nonprofit filled with free resources, supports, and lessons. We help people discern fact from fiction and the news and other information they consume and share. We've created some of the most innovative tools and programs to prevent the public from being fooled by false content. Misinformation and the lack of news literacy have created an existential threat to our democracy. As a result, there's an urgent need for news literacy for people of all ages. We believe education is the most effective approach because it empowers people to think for themselves and to recognize credible sources of information as well as misinformation. Two things are necessary for the survival of a healthy democracy: a free and independent press and the ability to determine whether information is credible. NLP teaches how to think about news and other information, not what to think. Let's return to our initial question. What do you believe? This was our initial prompt. It's essential we reflect and ask ourselves what we believe when it comes to various educational endeavors. And there are so many. We invest time and resources in what we believe. This is worth our time. Incorporating news literacy into our curriculum is worth our efforts. It's worth our focus. It's worth our commitment. Ultimately, young people have a right to news literacy education, and this is driving our desire, our mission, and our quest. But you're not alone in your quest to infuse news literacy into your curriculum. We have many resources to support teaching news literacy, including Checkology, our free cloud-based lesson platform, and our educator resource library. I will highlight resources from both spaces during our time together. I encourage you to check out all of our additional supports too. All of this and more is linked on the resource doc that's being shared in the chat. Our first session, just a reminder, we discussed what we can do offensively and defensively to stop the spread of mis and disinformation. A few simple strategies we can share with our students are pausing when we see a post that's triggering, taking time to check our emotions is important, and then we can easily fact check using our lateral reading skills to complete a quick search on the net. And remember, lateral reading is just opening up another tab, searching across the internet for information that confirms or doesn't confirm whatever we're trying to fact check. Well, let's dig into today's learning, starting with our resource center, infographics and posters, found at newslit.org. From the newslit.org site, you can access resources in the resource library. We have infographics and posters that can serve as anchor charts, as reminders in your physical and digital space to engage in the habits of healthy skepticism, fact checking, effective Google searching, and more. A great question to ask that ties right into our initial prompt: how do our classroom spaces reflect, echo, support our beliefs about news literacy? This new infographic offers 6 best practices to help you navigate fast-moving stories. A few of my favorite tips found on this infographic definitely connect to our topic today, Googling like a pro. Do a quick search. This is often our best defense against misinformation. Look for evidence, again, calling us to Google. Seek credible sources. Be intentional about looking for credible news and not relying on social media algorithms to bring you updates. This is worth repeating. Our students might understand that fact-checking is important, that searching is essential, but moving knowing into action requires practice. So, doing a quick search, looking for evidence, and seeking credible sources begs us to get curious, to implement news literacy skills. When we search, we often do so through search engines like Google. For many of our students, and I guess even many of us, we don't exactly understand how Google's algorithm works. See, we might be driving the car, but we don't understand how it runs. And that can be a problem. So just as it's helpful to know that you need to change your oil every so often and your tires need to be inflated and we need, our lights working and we can just, the list continues, right? So just as that's helpful to driving a car, it's helpful to know the basics with Google, to understand the search engine's algorithm. Here's a simplified version. Google sends out automated programs called spiders or bots to explore the internet. These bots visit web pages and follow links to discover new content. Then they gather information about web pages, including their text, images, and other media. The information collected by the bots is then organized and stored. It's sorted, and I think of it like a giant library. When you search, Google's algorithm goes to work. It looks through that giant library to find all the web pages that might be relevant. Finally, Google presents you with a list of search results, with the most relevant usually appearing at the top. So I'm going to repeat that. The most relevant usually appearing at the top. But relevant does not necessarily mean the best or even the most accurate. Of course, I'm going, to remind us that this is an extremely simplified version of what an explanation of Google's algorithm, because it's actually really complex. But it's a start to our understanding how the search engine works. But this is also important. Our past search impacts our present return. Our location impacts our return. So where we are physically, as well as where we've been in the digital landscape, and even the time we've spent in the digital landscape, that influences what we see in the now. Where we are, where we've been, how long we've been there, influences what we see in the now. So what? What are the advantages and disadvantages of this personalization? Share your thoughts in the chat, and any of my panelists, feel free to unmute and share your thoughts. Advantages, disadvantages of this personalization. Convenience. Yes, I agree. The convenience is an advantage. And I think if we didn't have that convenience, it would be near impossible to find what we want on the internet. But I'm going to go to the disadvantage. And I think of it like a healthy diet. So it's an echo chamber. If all I'm getting is what I want, apples and oranges. That's all I'm getting. All I'm getting is apples and oranges. Like we can see the issue with that. I'm missing other nutrients. I'm missing protein. We're in the echo chamber. So of course, the spaces and places we spend more time in are the spaces and places that make us feel comfortable, that agree with what our beliefs are. We're not seeking discourse because it's uncomfortable. So it's imperative that we understand how Google works enough that we can mess with the algorithm so we can get information outside of this personalization. We have to diversify the information that we're seeking because it's healthy. It's healthy to have an information diet from a multitude of spaces and places. The internet is so large. It's almost impossible to fathom. Sometimes it's easy to find the information we need, and sometimes, well, it's not. Well, we partnered with disinformation research expert Cindy Otis. She's also the author of True or False, a CIA analyst guide to spotting fake news, to bring you 8 tips that can help us improve our search results. This infographic is also found on newslit.org. It's linked on your doc too. We're just going to focus on 3 tips to help us Google like a pro. Okay, here we go. Punctuation has power. We can use punctuation to maximize our search. We can order the way something is searched. We will combine our use of quotation marks, which gets you exactly what's inside the quotation marks, along with our use of parentheses to tailor our search return. Think of it like parentheses used in a mathematical equation. It's an order of operations. The toolbar. It's there for us to use, but we are so used to seeing it, we forget that it has power. Let's maximize our search by using the tools Google has embedded. We can even filter to get the most recent information. Now, I'm going to demo this, and as I transition out of these slides and pull up a tab in Google, feel free to share some of your favorite Google tips in the chat. I know there are many, and I just shared a few. All right, here we go, group. Okay, so we are going to test out what we've been working on. So I said parentheses. Oh, you can see earlier searches, parentheses and quotes. So Taylor Swift. First, I'm just going to do Taylor Swift. Let's see what we get on our search return. Wow. Look at that number. We see images. Remember, it's searching relevant, not necessarily best. And didn't take long to get Travis Kelce did it. Okay. Yeah, I'm not interested in that relationship. I am interested in the concert. However, so quotes, concert, tickets, quote. And here we go. Now that also, I mean, that took out, a few million, took us down on our search return. So we also can use our filters. So we have tools, we have news. That took us down some more. Recent, past week. And a number doesn't even appear because we just narrowed our search focus, getting even less results on our return, but hopefully results that we are most interested in. Now, what I just modeled for you, you can model for students. I used Taylor Swift as an example, but you can connect to your content, issues that come up that are related to what you're teaching. Even just the think aloud, the talk aloud of demonstrating how to search is helpful for students because it's not habit. This is not habit. It's not habit for me. It isn't really habit for any of us. And that's why I appreciate that infographic, that I can use that so I can get a better return on my search. Something I did with my students when I was teaching is I would use country codes, for example. Every country has an internet code, and there's a way to search so you can see what people within that country have access to, because Google isn't the same everywhere. And I often use the example of Tiananmen Square. And if you're searching from China, for example, and you search Tiananmen Square, you see a beautiful garden. If you do that from, from our Google, you would see the infamous photo of a student in protest in front of a tank. So very stark, contrasting images. Now that could connect to a history classroom, of course. There's so many connections for your students, no matter what you're teaching. The world always offers a connection. And what a great way to model effective searching. And like I said, we just focused on a few of those resources. So I shared with you the infographics from newslit.org, but we have more, so much more. And that includes our resources on Checkology. I'm going to slow scroll so you can see some of these thumbnails. And I know last time you saw, is it legit? Our lessons last anywhere between 2 to 4 days. Think about 45-minute class periods. They're all taught by subject matter experts. All of the lessons include formative assessments, and they're designed using the backwards design format. So introduction of concept, content, and then of course, a formative assessment that follows. There's so many connections for you and your students here. Now, as we think about Googling like a pro, we also should think about the content that our students engage with after they Google. And we have a great lesson for that. That lesson is info zones. We were going to show this lesson last time, but we ran short on time. So I wanted to make sure that you got a sneak peek of this. So info zones is taught by Tracy Potts. And in this lesson, throughout this lesson, it's teaching students about the zones of information. How do we know if something is an influencer versus, is it straight news versus an advertisement, entertainment, fill in the blank. So how do we know what's what? And all the ELA teachers in the room, I'm sure, that perked your ears up since that connects to a lot of our standards. Let's listen to Tracy Potts as she just gives an intro to info zones.
When I was starting out in journalism, we didn't have nearly as much information available to us. There was no internet, no email, no texting, no social media, not even YouTube. We got all our information from textbooks, books we bought or checked out from the library, magazines and newspapers we bought or subscribed to, TV shows we watched on just a handful of channels, and films we actually had to go to the movie theater to see. With no access to the internet, we also couldn't share information with a large group of people at one time. What that meant is that only professionals could share information for the public. They acted as gatekeepers, determining what to share with the public and what not to share. But now, anyone can share information, which means that more voices have been added to the mix, including yours and your classmates. It also means that you can't trust everything you read because, well, anyone, anywhere can post and share whatever they want, whenever they want.
So true. That definitely has changed our information landscape with the ability for anyone from anywhere to post what they want when they want. And so when we're using Google to search for information, we have to have that realization and that awareness. Like I mentioned, all of the lessons have formative assessments. So this is an example of one of those formative assessments. You can zoom in on this type of content, and then students are able to decide what that content is. Is it meant to entertain, provoke, persuade, document, inform, or sell? And it's a click and drag. And once they've done that, when they hit next, it's auto-graded. So oops, and you can see I get a retry. Of course, it's a formative assessment, so it allows for that. When you're looking at our lessons, you see these dots. They're called elements. So as you progress, you're progressing through the elements. You also probably notice the WW on the side. And that's our word wall. All of our lessons are equipped with word walls. And you're also able to front load lessons with vocabulary by using our lesson guides, which I will show you in a moment. Right here in Checkology, resources, when you click on resources, you can filter by lessons. I chose InfoZones. And these are all of the resources that you have available to you to help support teaching of that lesson, including a full lesson guide, a complete transcript, and a lovely poster. So another visual support for your learners. During our discussion of how Google works, we talked about algorithms. We have a lesson, Introduction to Algorithms, that helps students understand the algorithms of social media as well as search engines and understand the personalization. So I just wanted to show you the lesson guide for this so you can see how helpful the lesson guide is and actually notice that we covered some of these objectives in our earlier chat. So you see the host, you are given a duration estimate, you get the summary of what's to happen, and look at these objectives. I can explain how algorithms use data to personalize information for individuals. I can describe the advantages and disadvantages of this technology. What an important objective for students to be able to understand that, especially in a time when they live in so many different social spaces that follow so many different algorithms. Understanding that is helpful to their literacy habits. There are essential questions. I'm going to scroll down for you and you can see the lesson outline. I like using the lesson outline for planning purposes. And then of course, there's that word wall that I mentioned. So if you want to front load the lesson with that academic vocabulary, if you're working on tiered vocabulary, you certainly can do so using the lesson guide. As I continue to share lessons, are there any questions for me? Group that Terry, Brittany, you want to unmute and ask? Or am I okay to keep showing and sharing?
You are okay. I'm not seeing any questions right now.
Thank you. All right, so our lessons. I went right to showing you one of our lessons from the Learn category. I'm in Checkology. I'm going to scroll the top so you can see where I'm at. I'm in Content. I showed you a Learn, the algorithms lesson and InfoZones. That's found in the Learn category. Those are our full lessons that I mentioned, 2 to 4 days, thinking of 45-minute class periods. You can see from underneath that lesson, I know we mentioned this last time, but just a reminder, those lines are not grade band. It's not related to grade band or Lexile reading level. It's just complexity of content. So obviously algorithms is a bit more complex than what is news. But when you're thinking about incorporating those lessons, you can use that as you're deciding what fits where. And our lessons are malleable, they're supplemental. They are meant to be cross-curricular. So with your instructional design, you could place them wherever it makes sense. The practice and extensions, you saw a practice and extension last time. You saw, is it legit? And that's found at the bottom. But all of these do exactly as the title describes. They extend the learning and they are additional practice. Fact checks. That's what I would like to show you now. Fact checks are missions where students are applying these skills to as they're taking part in this mission. And the one that I think will be of interest to you that connects right with what we're talking about today is, can you search like a pro? Can you search like a pro? Let's check it out. In this mission, Cindy Otis, I mentioned her name earlier, the CIA official, she challenges students to debunk the conspiracy theory birds aren't real, to find what was the origin of this conspiracy. Was it a conspiracy theory? Was it satire? Was it something else altogether? And And so students get this mission and complete tasks with her support along the way. And so it's set up just a bit different than the lesson with the formative assessment. Students are actively seeking, searching, and trying to uncover information like detectives to figure out what is this birds aren't real conspiracy theory about. So I'm just going to give you a little snippet of that challenge. We get embedded support. So we have the tutorial for online search skills that connects right to that infographic that I shared. We have a tutorial for lateral reading. If you remember from the first session, again, that's reading across the internet to confirm or not confirm information. And then there's a link to the infographic. So all of that's embedded into this challenge. All right, so let's hear from Cindy Otis, and this is just her call to action to students. So it's really just the introduction.
This is Cindy Otis, and I just wanted to call personally to thank you for applying to be an analyst on my team and to offer you the job. I'm working on a big project about an obscure conspiracy theory with a few weird twists and turns, and I could really use your help. I'm really glad to have you on board. I just sent you an email with your first task.
Okay, so this mission continues like that, where she checks in emails, calls, texts to let students know like what we need to figure out next. And so you can see from this element, here's our email. She's asking us to search birds aren't real. We need to use our skills that we've learned about filtering time to do that. And we have to look between September 1, 2018, November 30, 2018. So again, like you can see evidence by this. Those skills that we're learning about Googling like a pro are put to action with the mission of figuring out this conspiracy theory. It's definitely a great lesson. So we have that and more. I would love at this time to show you how to set up a class in Checkology and help you get started. Most of you already have Checkology accounts, and if you don't, go to checkology.org and you can register. You're registering for an educator account. It will ask you to put your zip code in and you can find your school. If you work for a regional agency or you're not assigned to a specific school, you can just choose a school for the sake of creating a class. So again, use your email, single sign-on, whether that's Microsoft, Google, or you can use an email with a password of your own choosing and get signed up for Checkology. And I'm going to show you how to create a class with lessons for your students. Once you're signed in, you're going to see this, except you won't see all of this. You won't see AP English and CA example. You won't see that because you haven't created a class yet. What you will see as I scroll down is add a class. So we're going to add a class. Class title. Student type, I'm going to be in high school. Grade level, let's do 10th grade. And we're going to go ELA. I want to explain a couple of these settings for everybody. So course lock, that means that students complete the lessons that we give them in order that we give them. So if you don't want them to jump around to different lessons, keep the course lock on. It's on by default. Open advanced settings. Advanced settings, it's important that we take a peek at this. The pre and post assessment is on by default. That's 15 questions. It's great data to have, but know with that course lock on, and if you leave the pre-assessment on, students have to complete that before they can get into the lesson. I just wanted to point that out for your planning purposes, that would have to be completed before they start. And if you decide you don't want the pre and post, you simply turn that off. One-to-many lesson mode. The one-to-many lesson mode, if you turn that on, you can decide which lessons later you want that to be on for, but all that means is that from your screen, you're showing those videos. Just like the video of Tracy Potts, where she was talking about infozones and we can get information from anywhere. That video would be showing from your screen, and then students would have that blanked out on their screen. They would only have on their screen the formative assessments. So if you wanted to be the pilot car driving the pace, one-to-many might be the avenue that you would choose to take. If you want students independently going through those lessons, then you could leave that off and they would be able to do so. Co-teachers, because you've used your zip and you have identified your school, you will see other teachers from your school that are also registered, and you would be able to click them and they could be co-teachers with you in this space. So once you have all that, we get to create a class. Now, I might be going too slow or I might be going too fast for you. No worries. I have a link on our resource doc for you that shows and shares this, that you can go at your own pace. If you feel that I'm too fast or too slow, feel free to follow that. And I highlighted it in yellow on that resource doc, so you are able to use that if you so choose. All right. From here, we have the choice to add students right away, or we can assign a course. My personal preference is to get the content first before I assign it to students, so that's how I'm going to show you. Assign course. Checkology has default classes based on what you identified as your grade level that you're teaching, as well as the content you're teaching. So you can see that we can start from this Checkology 101 for high school course. We can change course by clicking change course, and you can see the other courses that exist. You can also, when you click change course, you can just start from scratch. That's possible too. I'm going to customize this course. So I'm going to click customize. It wants me to name it because I am making my own version of this. So here we go. Description. And then I'm starting from this preset. Save. Once I do that, I will see content. It's very intuitive. You're clicking and dragging what you want. So, yep, I want info zones because we shared that. The First Amendment, I'm going to take out this one. I want to keep that. And take that out. I'm going to keep these. That's all you do. Let's say you see something over here that's of interest. Oh, I want that. And you just drag it. Now, remember, students get this in the order that you're putting it. So if you decide that you want to change the order because it makes sense for your instructional design, feel free to move this stuff around. You have that capability. And once you've added all the things, your changes are saved. And notice, can you search like a pro is in there. So that's great. That's already there for us. So our class is ready to rock and roll. Now to get back to it, I'm going to go to my dashboard. And we're going to go through all my practice classes and we're going to find it. So you can do that as well. These are all the courses I've made as examples. Here is the one that I made for us. So I remember I haven't added my students yet. So we can do that. There's a couple ways we can do that. Class join link, copy it, and I paste it. And students can use their single sign-on to get into my class. It's that simple. Manage students. I get back here and I can add my students if I don't want to use that single sign-on. I can add students directly. I can invite students to join where they could then choose to use their single sign-on or create an email or use their email and create a password. The add students directly is how that works with all apps. When you add students, then a username is generated as well as a password. So essentially there's three options for how you add students. The easiest, of course, would be that single sign-on option where you just paste a link into your learning management system. Students click it and are able to get into that course. Now, if you ever need to change your class settings, remember we left our course lock on. We also didn't turn that one-to-many mode on. We can go into class settings and edit that at any time. So that's an option. And I want to show you one other setting that I think is important to point out. Right there. We're going to click on that. Manage account. Video preference. You might have noticed that when I was playing our video, it was happening in YouTube. I like the closed captioning options in YouTube that I can change the language. So I make it YouTube. By default, it's Vimeo. Depending on what your district allows or prefers, you can change the video preference. And when you do that, it changes for all your students. So all the videos will be coming in through one of these three players. So that's a setting as well. And again, I did that right here in the red setting icon. I'm going to pause for a moment. Are there any questions, Brittany, Terry, that I need to address while I'm in this space?
I don't see any questions coming in yet.
Okay. All right, wonderful. So, group, we've covered a lot. We talked about Checkology content. There's learn, practice extensions, fact checks. I shared with you info zones. You saw that formative assessment. We talked about the resources here, full transcripts, there's posters, we can filter by lessons. I shared introduction to algorithms, and we did look at the word wall that's filled on that lesson guide. We even went into our missions. You got to think about, can you search like a pro? I wonder if I intrigued any of you about are birds real, not real? Turns out it was satirical, but it started out as a joke. But you got to go through the lesson to uncover all of that. And of course, we got the message to complete this mission from Cindy. But there's so much in Checkology, so much in Checkology. I have to show you what I think is an absolute gem, and that's journalist visits. So journalist visits is also free. You can filter by area of expertise, and what you're doing is you're inviting a journalist to extend learning in your classroom, to share their professional experience with students. We have journalists from rural newspapers all the way from nationally known, news organizations. So we can filter by area of expertise. You can filter by language spoken. You can filter by availability options as well. And then once you find a journalist that fits what you're doing in your class, you simply click on the journalist and you're able to invite them into your room where they can, again, if location allows, come in person. Otherwise, they're able to video conference with you. You can check out what they've written, what they've done. But what an awesome opportunity to humanize the profession. And I think that's important as we think about news literacy, just as we think about education, that we humanize our profession, because there are real people, journalists, following real standards, just as educators do, trying to get it right. And it's always wonderful when you can invite professionals into your room to show and share their experiences with students. All right, I'm going to take us back to our slides for a moment, and then we'll go through some questions, and we'll have some time to chat before we close our webinar. So we've established news literacy is important. You'll find that news literacy connects to content standards. Even the standards above can be recognized as helpful in accomplishing discipline-specific literacy tasks. We know misinformation infects all facets of our life. No discipline is immune or safe from its reach. Our resources are supplemental, They can fit with the learning you have already designed. They're free and available to you. When we think about the what as news literacy, the news literacy project is really the how. Information is the basis for civic literacy, agency, and action. Students are inheriting the largest and most complex information landscape in human history. Not preparing the next generation to successfully navigate and play a role in shaping this landscape is fundamentally unfair. We have free resources to help you infuse news literacy, to help you help your students know what to trust, what to share, and what to act on. So let's chat. What questions do you have about what I shared or ideas? And then, of course, Brittany and Terry, feel free to unmute and we can visit about all things news literacy. And
Not
Jamie's
seen any questions yet, Aaron.
all right. Well, that's easy enough. Going back to our initial question about news literacy and our beliefs about news literacy and even connecting to the various educators in the space. I know you got to see who we have representing and what grade bands and what content. Is there anything, Terry or Brittany, that you would like to add to share with those folks that I may have missed?
Nothing from me. I feel like you did a really great job covering all of the most important points about Checkology. And it looks like the chat feels the same way. All saying thank you and that this is great stuff.
Wonderful.
So we just did get one question in the Q&A, and it's how do students enter the class, use that class code? Do they get an invite by email? What's that process look like for the students?
So the students, when you copy that class link, if you give that to them, then it prompts them to sign in. They can use their single sign-on. So you just paste that into your LMS, your learning management system, if that's how you want them to join with that link. Terry, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think one of the things that you did mention with copying the link, I think that's the easiest way to go ahead and share it. I know that sometimes when I share things with my students, if I write it on the board, inevitably it will get typed in wrong. So sharing the link is one of the best ways to go ahead and do that with the students. And that was just from the class tile that you had, and you just said copy link right next to that. Could you just share that real quick again? Somebody's asking where that was from.
Yeah, you bet. I'll share my screen now. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard. Right here. That class join link, just copy that and then paste that where you place things for students, whether, on your website, your learning management system, wherever you might normally paste resources for them.
And just to share one more thing, like when you share that link, that's including that class code, and the students only need to click that the first time when they log in, because the next time that they log in, in successive times, they'll be right in your class, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's the single sign-on is easy. And if you're, if you need to share with your tech director, of course, we have information about all the privacy laws that we follow, all of them. But if you don't want to have students using emails, they can register by where I showed you with enrolling students with their name and then a username's created and passwords created. So there's all the ways, but just so you know, we collect minimal student information. So that's helpful as well. So
So
I just saw the question about, can we add Checkology to Clever Canvas? And we are a free resource. And so because of that, the integration Canvas, you're just pasting a link. So it'd just be like your students going to any other website that you would have them go. So there isn't a seamless like gradebook integration, that kind of integration, but it's just a link to get them in. So to answer the question about does it integrate? No, but it's a link, so that's okay.
And I will hit the Clever one real quick.
Okay.
So on Clever, as Erin mentioned, our resource is completely free. And so we do not have a Clever integration at this point.
But I do want to say that's why we make sure it's so simple for students to enter in just with that link. So it isn't a process. It's just that one time enter in and then you're ready. You're ready to go. I know that we had some elementary educators in the room as well as middle school and secondary. And I think when you're thinking about tomorrow, like what can I do tomorrow? And I'm going to share this with you. You can do exactly what I did. Take one tip, take 2 tips, 3 tips, and talk aloud and do a talk aloud with your students. And that's where you can start with that infographic. That's an easy win that could happen right tomorrow. And like I said, the world always offers a connection to our content and the concepts we're teaching. I encourage you to use those infographics and share them with your colleagues. They're free, they're rich, and they're great visual support. So that's another win. Another you can do right tomorrow. And then, of course, lastly, I encourage you to think about of the lessons that you've seen from us. What's a lesson that you could use in March? Is legit, fantastic. Any content can incorporate is it legit. We shared that during our first session. Info zones. I think if you teach 5th grade or if you teach 12th grade, no matter. Info zones is the Leatherman tool of our lessons. It fits everywhere and can accomplish all things. You can use that in March. All of these are good reminders, but they are the soul at hitting those news literacy concepts because, using Google is great, right? But also being able to decipher the information once we get there is extremely important. And I think those 2 lessons would most definitely help with that. And then, of course, if you want to have some fun, send your students off with Google Like a Pro, because that birds aren't real conspiracy theory isn't triggering. And I think that's the point. None of us are going to get emotionally triggered by birds aren't real. And I think that's what's super important about our lessons is that we focus on teaching those skills necessary to discern, to decipher, to help get curious for healthy skepticism. And we leave the emotions aside. So when our students do come in contact with information that might be triggering, they've been equipped with that skill set to pause, to lateral read, to fact check. And so I encourage you, again, think about tomorrow and then think about March. We got some time before we send students, off to break. And what great things we can equip them with before we do so. So we'll hang on for a while if there are any individualized questions that we might be able to help you with. But again, use that resource doc and all the things listed. I want to remind you of 2 things I mentioned way at the beginning. Some of you might not have been with us yet. So I'm gonna get slides open here right before we close out, because I want to remind you about our upcoming last session as well. Okay. So first off, change makers, Links are on the resource doc. And I'm going to turn that closed captioning off. Links are on the resource doc for you. Alan C. Miller, that's our founder, News Literacy Educator of the Year. If you know of colleagues that are teaching news literacy and inspiring students, please nominate them. Or if you're doing that yourself, nominate yourself. And then a student following along those same lines. So the links are in that resource doc for you to nominate. Please share this with your colleagues too. We love to honor, highlight, and spotlight the great work that's happening in schools across this country surrounding news literacy. And lastly, April 10th, that's our last session, AI's impact. So we hope you'll be there. You can see the webinar flyer link on the screen, but also know this is linked on that resource doc. So if you haven't registered, I hope you do. And like I said, we'll stay on for a few minutes after I stop sharing for any additional questions. Thank you for joining us. And I'm excited to hear how you've inspired and empowered your students to Google like a pro.